I am what some would deem a professional speaker, which growing up no one would have pegged me as, you know? You just don't hear this voice and think, you know, I think he speaks for a living. I do this a lot, and I'm fairly well practiced at it, but I just hear some people, I don't know, like a song leader today, and think, why can't I have a voice like that? And, you know, whenever, where's Hugh's not here, but when Rachel heard Hugh speak for the first time, she said, are you on the radio? And that just made his day, because apparently no one had ever said that to Hugh. But there's just part of me that wishes, you know, I'm glad God gave me the voice that I have. It's gotten me into some crazy situations and got me out of some. It doesn't happen a whole lot anymore because I try to man it up when I answer the phone now. But I used to try to be real nice, you know. I used to say hello, and you know that could go either way, right? It could be man or woman. Most people picked woman. You would think it would go either way, but there were times that I was home and people would say call, and I was just by myself, and they'd call, and I would say hello, and they would say, is Mr. Neeley there? Yes, hold on. Hello? I was tempted to go in further, you know, and say, oh, he's out in the shed building things out of wood, making crunching noises, whatnot. He's manly. Oh, I'm getting at him. He's coming to the phone. So you can understand just when that happens, and then you're supposed to stand up in front of people and say things. It's just you wish like what was going on here was a little as solid as what was going on up here. But it's not. It's just, and I hear people with just golden voices, and I think, wow, you know, wouldn't that be amazing? But in the end, this is what God gave me. This is what He's given me to use, and I've used it. I've used it fairly well, and it served me. But for some reason, we're just a little prone to want what other people have. You might can imagine, this is as low as it goes right here. I mean, there's days when I'm sick, I can sing bass, but otherwise I'm a tenor and an alto. Like there's some people who I'd like to be able to sing that high. No, you wouldn't, because it's not like this, you know. There's downsides and upsides to everything that you got, but we always focus on the downsides of what we have and the upsides of what other people have. We always want better and newer technology. I've heard, you know, shouldn't we have had flying cars by now? People who say that haven't thought through flying cars. Drive to Texarkana and count how many cars are on the side of the road that have just stopped working for a second. Now imagine you're in the air when that happens. That's not like we think, oh, what a great upside, but we don't think that every attribute, everything that you encounter has a downside. And whenever we detract from what God has blessed us with and give and want what other people have, that hurts us deep down because it's actually a blindness. You aren't genuinely seeing what they have. And you aren't properly seeing what you have. The last commandment of the 10 Commandments is different from the rest of the 10. The rest of the 10 are, you treat God in this way, and then in Commandment 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, he says you treat other people in these ways. And then on the 10th one, he has one that's hard to peg. Like if you murder someone and I see you murder someone, I can say, you have broken the 6th commandment. Like I can nail that down. If you lie about your neighbor, or you commit adultery, or you steal, I can see that. If you dishonor your father and mother, I can watch that happen, teenagers. And but covet, I don't see you do that. And that usually isn't something that happens just in the deepest, maybe the darkest moments of our lives, when we don't like what we have. We would rather God had blessed us with what He blessed other people with. He says, you shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife. Deuteronomy, when it gives the 10 Commandments, switches wife with it mixes those two up. It's do not covet your neighbor's wife. Do not covet your neighbor's house. If your wife, manservant or maidservant, is ox or donkey or anything that belongs to your neighbor. This is a very Jewish way of saying, don't covet anything. Now, he could have just said, don't covet anything, but he said, don't covet their house, his wife, the manservant, maidservant, ox or donkey, or anything else, etc. Don't covet a single thing he has. Now we wrestle with this more than you probably realize. I wish I was as tall as him. I wish I looked like her. I wish I had been born into that situation. Paul, I didn't mean to point just at you, but yeah, it's understandable. You would think we worked that out beforehand, but we didn't. I wish I had this skill set or that skill set. There's people who can't do what I do, and the majority of them, I can't do what they do. What I stand in front of you and do every Sunday is about all I can do. Ask Rachel. That's about all I'm good at. You've got skill sets but we always want someone else's height, their weight, their situation. We just want something else. And it's not in the neighbor that's the problem. It's not the particular neighbor that you choose. It's in you. It only goes on inside your heart. The coveting only takes place inside you. It's something that only you and God can see. It's always funny to me when I hear teenagers or even young adults, old adults, say something like this. I don't care what anybody thinks of me. If that were true, you would have just told me that. Because you want me to think, you want me to know something about you. And so you just told me you don't care what anybody thinks. People who don't care what anybody thinks about them usually don't talk that much. We want people to know who we are and to respect us in some way, so we often put up a front and say, well, I'm different than what I am, than what I actually am. God has blessed you in a certain way. We're all different. And if I then say, well, God, I want to be like them, what does that say to God? The creator of the heavens and the earth, and to me. God who gave me certain abilities and didn't give me others. A good question is, what could God give you that would make you happy? Follow-up question. Was it God's goal to make you happy? Or was it His goal to make you? And then you must decide whether or not you're going to love the creation that God made. Now, this isn't about, well, you just got to find yourself and be yourself. That's super easy. Just wake up where you are. It's about being what God created you to be. Growing into what God has planned for you. When you were 5, you weren't what God wanted you to be. And I would guess that when you're 25, 35, 45, you're not quite yet what God has wanted. God is still growing you. And you're experiencing this process. And as you experience, if you then say, well, look around, God. All these people have it so much better than me. Moses is talking to a group of people. God's talking to a group of people whom He just walked out of slavery. Right? Exodus 3 through current, Exodus 20. He has been working on getting them out of slavery. They have been in slavery for over 400 years, and now they have walked out and they are free. All of them are free. And He says, in your newfound freedom, don't start wanting what other people have. Now they did this. They did this later. They came to Samuel and they said, hey, we want a king. Like the other nations have. And he said, well, okay, we'll do that, but He's going to enslave your kids and take your daughters. And He's going to tax you beyond belief. But if you want one, you can have one. They said, yes, that's for us. And then that's what happened. Took 2 kings in. Solomon was already doing all the things, or 3 kings in. Solomon was already doing all the things that they said he would do. We always think we want it better. The problem is we base our value, we base our worth on what we look like, what our job pays us, and how socially in style we are. That's why I'm wearing this shirt. Had the same haircut since I was 4. But we base our worth on something different than God created me, and to all of you, He has set you free. God thought you were worth rescuing. So doesn't it often sound ridiculous what we want instead? What we want from, I would rather have what that person has. What, freedom in Christ? Because if it's anything else, it's not worth your covet. If it's anything else, it's not worth your desire for it. You're going to get that, and you'll want something else. And you're going to get that thing, and you'll want something else. That's why people who spend through their paychecks before the week is over, when they win the lottery, they spend through that before the year's over. It's not about what you have, it's about who you are. And you are God's people. is rescued people. See, we want to be better. We want to be taller and have a better voice and have better money, and we want more. But God has given us everything. And as Christians, as we have said over, I don't know if you've caught this over the past 3 sermons, as Christians, we should humble ourselves like Christ humbled himself. He was God and he became man. And as a man, he subjected himself to death. And not any death, but the death of a criminal on the cross. And it was because of that humbling that God lifted him up. We should stop trying to climb the ladder of success, the ladder of outward glory in this life. And start trying to serve others. It's hard to covet when you're serving. You think Mother Teresa, those of you who don't know the story of Mother Teresa, she was a Catholic nun who devoted her life to helping lepers in Calcutta die with dignity. She wasn't saving their lives, she just went over there. She did hospice for lepers in Calcutta. Do you think she ever thought, I wish I was taller? Because she was real little. No. She was too busy helping lepers in Calcutta die in peace. When you respect your fellow man instead of envy them, when you serve your fellow man instead of wish that you were them, something changes inside of you where you don't wish you looked like them anymore. You just want to serve them. And you stop thinking about how important you are, and you just start serving. John 13 says this about Jesus. The evening meal was being served, and the devil had already prompted Judas Iscariot, son of Simon, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. This is a huge setup. John is saying about Jesus was aware that everything was under his control. At that moment, Jesus was aware. I don't know if it came to him then, probably not, but at least let's acknowledge before we go any further in the story that Jesus knew all things had been put under him. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with a towel that was wrapped around him. Jesus was above everyone, and he took the lowest of jobs for the lowest of slaves. If you were a slave in a household, and you messed up the coffee or whatever. I know wasn't the case, but you messed up somehow and you got demoted. They said you go all the way down the ranks. You were a foot washer. And us preachers have been making this sound real nice for quite some time. And said, well, because people's feet got really dirty with all the sand and whatnot. It wasn't the sand that was the problem. As a Jew, it wasn't the sand that made the job look clean. It was the canvas. It's just the truth. That's why the job was such frowned upon. It wasn't just sand on the feet. And so, Jesus gets down and takes off his outer clothing, the respected garb of rabbis, and sets it down and wraps a towel around his waist, gets down on his knees and washes the feet of those, the lowest, the dirtiest job for people who were below him. If we're going to be like Jesus, if we're going to look like our Savior, we've got to stop being so concerned about how we can move up. How we can look better. We've got to be concerned with, instead, how we can serve those around us. Rabbis, for centuries after the Ten Commandments were given, once said that if you follow, the 10th commandment isn't even a commandment, it's a blessing. That if you follow the other 10 commandments, that you love the Lord your God, and that you don't have any other gods before Him, and that you don't take His name lightly, you don't worship idols, you keep the Sabbath holy, and if you honor your parents, and by honoring your parents I mean not murdering, and not stealing, and not committing adultery, and not lying about your neighbor. Like, if you did that sort of thing, you wouldn't want anybody else's life. You wouldn't want anybody else's house, or their wife, or their donkey, or their manservant, the maidservant, or all. Because truly living under the salvation of God leaves me with nothing else to want. Leaves me with nothing else to desire. Okay, so I look this way. I'm this height. I've finally grown into my head. That was a complaint before. It's like a Tootsie Roll Pop. But I've got, like, we all got things that we can look at ourselves and say, man, I wish that was a little different. We are who God made us. And He saw fit to redeem us. Living under His salvation, there's nothing more you could want. Nothing more. Try to let the salvation of God cover everything you do. Cover how you treat your parents, how you treat your kids, treat your spouse, how you value other people's possessions, and how you interact with God. Try to let that rule your life. I can guarantee you'll start serving people and stop wishing you lived there. The covetous and the servant are on opposite ends of the spectrum. So stop seeking to move up. And like Jesus, humble yourself. Become less of what you want to be and be a servant to all. You won't regret that. And you'll never, as a servant, look around and think, man, I wish I had it better, because you chose to wash. That's the God you worship. The God who chose to become man. The God who chose to die. The God who conquered death. We serve the King who washes feet. If you don't follow that King, I would suggest you follow Him today. If you don't know how that works, how that looks, come forward, we'll talk about it. If you want to follow Jesus, you want to follow the King who washes feet, you want to leave that life of wishing you were somebody else and embrace who God created you to be. A follower of Jesus. A servant alongside His Son, washing the feet of the world. If you want to be that, then by all means, come forward as we stand.